All right. So yes, I understand some people here are new and haven't had any sessions before, haven't seen my videos yet, I suppose. So I'm just gonna give basic instructions to both surrender and inquiry, and you can choose which one to do. So the basic idea of self-inquiry is searching for your obvious, innate, um, moment-to-moment sense of being. So that sense that you're here right now, you're going to look for where you are, so to say. You can also think of it as who you are if you want, but um, you look for where you are, and as you as you search, you notice that various things come to mind as to where you might be, and the key being that you have to notice that whatever it is that uh, you brought up as supposedly you is something of which you're aware. And the basic principle of self-inquiry is, and the basic principle of the spiritual search is, you cannot be that which of which you are aware, because if you were it, you wouldn't be able to be aware of it. You wouldn't have any distance between you and it to be able to experience it as a separate entity. So then you repeat the process basically, and again you say, okay, well, who's aware of that? When you say and who's aware of that, you're really just repeating the basic inquiry, which is, where am I? Period. So you repeat that process again and again. And this is a very, very simplified explanation, but give that a try for the next 10 minutes if you'd like, and we can go further. I'll also give an explanation right now anyway of surrender, which is the other flip side of the coin of self-inquiry. The basic idea of surrender is uh, what we're trying to do is to defocus our attention on everything that's going on, but to do so in an attentive way. So, the example I always give is like a TV that's on in the corner and that it's going, and you don't have to change the channel or turn it off. You merely have to ignore it, and you have to just notice it enough that you don't get drawn into it. And so the idea in surrender is you ignore all thought, or really ignore pretty much everything, and you also relax what feels like your willpower or your focusing ability, which really is the same thing. These go together because when you ignore what is happening essentially in the world and in your mind, you don't take it to be real. And when you don't take it to be real, you also don't expend your willpower, what feels like that burdensome feeling of effort on it. You would have no reason to do that if you're ignoring it or not taking it to be real. Again, these are different words for the same thing. So very, very cursory explanations of each, I know, but I would say pick one of those methods to try your best at it, whoever's new, and give it 10 minutes. Um, I would suggest, if you can, eyes open, anyone new. I always suggest eyes open because the idea behind these practices is to export them into life and do them all the time. So not just during sitting sessions here. So let's give it a try for 10 minutes, and I know it'll be awkward probably, but give it a try and we will discuss what happens afterwards. All right, here we go. All right. So anyone want to share their experiences, or you're also free to ask questions about the practice generally, or how your practice has been last however long. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt that I'm trying to, like, especially today you asked me to practice on where I am, and trying to see, even though I know, like, I deeply try to see how I, where I am. I'm sitting on the thing. Then I feel that I know that I know I have the couch knowledge, so I am with the knowledge of the couch, or and I am inside. I am feeling warm. I am with the feeling, and I am with the hearing, like a hearing, and then I collectively I come to know that I am here. So I am with everything that are making me feel where I am. So I individually feel everything, and then I also felt that. Like, oh, I have to remind my group to come join. So then my mind is there. So I am with that mind also. I felt then okay, then I come back. Then okay, I am really here. I am, and that feeling that I am enjoying the silence, kind of a feeling. I know that I am here, kind of a feeling that I am with that feeling also. That's kind of inquiry I gotten into. So I
Right.
feel that I with knowledge plus I am also experiencing that I am with my memory, and I am with going chasing. So I am kind of everywhere with me, happening, and I am here, and then that's what I went up to.
So that's great. So you notice, right, how as you move, right, you move essentially. I mean, this isn't always strictly in this order, but you're moving from basically quote unquote grosser things like
Yeah.
well, to subtler and subtler elements of the mind, right? And it's interesting your phrasing, right? I'm with these things, I'm with these things. I mean, and so the question is, right, since you're with these things, um, you actually are not in any of those things, right? You see that, right?
Hmm.
All the things you name are all places where you are not per this exercise, in a sense. In the deeper sense, you're right. You pervade them as well. I mean, you can view it that way. But um, but in a sense, right, the one who is observing all of the things that you mentioned, from the sofa and the couch to the feelings to the enjoyment of peace to the sense of here-ness, right? This constellation, this collection of uh, phenomena, none of them are your location, in a sense. I mean, in one sense. I mean, there's again a different sense in which you can say that all of them are your location, but but you see you as the one who is aware of them cannot be in them per in our limited structure. In our limited current structure, I want you to notice the fact that you, the observer, cannot be in the observed. So all the things that you mentioned, which obviously you're doing it correctly to a large extent because you're moving through all these things. But I want you to just be very clear that you're looking for where you are, but you can't be in any of those things. If you were there, you would not be able to be aware of them. If you were in them, you could not be aware of them. Does that logic make sense?
Yeah, you cannot be in them. I get it,
So
and
where are
you
so
can.
you can notice that distinction, right? Like so, I mean, which again, I think you are, but I'm just making it very, very clear. Like like there's a separate sense, right? As you're aware of all these different pieces that you've
Yeah.
mentioned, right? There's the awareness of them,
Mhm.
and separate from that, there's the sense that I'm here observing them. So there's two pieces of data. There's the them, the different pieces, and then there's the you who's aware of not being them, of observing them, and of not being them,
Yeah.
right? So that you sense you're looking for, well, where is that located? And when you say located, we mean, what is it basically, or how is it known in your experience? What element of your experience is giving you that information?
Hmm.
none of the things, which again, I totally understand. So I mean, I understand the way that you know, I understand exactly how it might feel, right? That you're a collection of these things, but you're not a collection of these things. You're none of these things in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
All the things you mentioned, you're none of them. Those are like all the things that you aren't in a sense. Those things, all the things you are not. Those are things are all the things where you aren't, where you are not. You are aware of them, which means that you must be located elsewhere or in some other way. You must be located not in them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like you are in that context kind of a thing. You may not be inside, but you may be outside looking at it, or
Yeah, yeah, outside, whatever outside means, quote unquote. I mean, again, outside is another problematic word because outside again is a concept, right? So
context.
yes, but you're right, exactly, right? So to notice, right, you have this, you have some other light that is coming in from some channel that is apart from any of these pieces that is telling you that you are aware of these pieces, of each piece that you mentioned, of your physical sensations, of your emotions, of your thinking, right? Of even your sense of here-ness, right? These are all mental bits and pieces,
Mm-hmm.
right? Those pieces are like pieces of data, you might say. But another piece of data, which is coming from, which is separate from them, is your sense that you're here, aware of them.
Yes.
Right. Right. So that piece has a different quality, or it cannot be, it's not reducible to any of those
Mm-hmm.
pieces.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that piece, we're trying to isolate that piece. We're trying to say, okay, my current experience is a mixture of that I piece plus whatever phenomena that I'm experiencing right now. So can I mentally cut out the
Mm-hmm.
phenomena and see what is it that remains? So
Yes.
cut, 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 cut. Well, what remains? What is I minus all the phenomena? What is I in itself? What am I in myself apart from the
Yeah.
pieces?
Yeah.
That
Even though conceptually I wanted to really experience it from going from the beginning today, especially as you.
No, no, that's great. No, look, you're obviously moving in the right direction because again, you're going grosser to subtler, and it makes sense. But but it's and maybe it will take time because it takes time sometimes for it to sink in. Sometimes it takes a very long time, actually, is the truth. But because it's such a big, it's such a basic thing. In a way, it's the heart of what we're looking for, right? This notion that I'm mentioning, which is so fundamental, but at the same time, it's actually very tricky. Um, that that
Yeah.
do you hear what I'm saying? See what I'm saying? That there's two pieces of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The word that you used, cutting it from everything.
yeah,
That's a good.
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
That want to slice it,
There's a mix
slice it. Yeah.
there's a mixture going on, right? So it's almost like you're you know uh it's like there's a soup or something like that and you're eating the soup, right? And there's so many things in the soup. There's different salt and spice and flavors, vegetables, what beans, whatever else you put in the soup, right? And you're like, yeah, but what's the taste of the water or something like that? What's the actual taste of the water, right? Every time you eat the soup, you're tasting the water that's in the soup plus all these other elements, right? You're like, oh yeah, I taste this spice, that spice, blah, blah, blah. But what about the water itself? But every time you taste the soup, you're tasting the water. Every bite has the water in it, but the water is overshadowed or ignored because of all the other textures and flavors from all the other elements. So, if you want to notice the water itself, you have to notice that every bite of soup, in order for it to be a bite of soup, it has to have that watery element in it. But it's very hard to notice the water in itself because you're noticing all the things that are much brighter than it, so to say, more specific than it.
Yes.
So every time you notice these things, the issue is to notice there's that distinction, right? Because you're looking out, basically, you're looking out at this stuff. And meanwhile, you here are the ignored observer of it. And we're trying to turn the attentional focus to highlight the usually ignored silent observer of these phenomena.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Okay. Well, we'll keep going this as many times. It will take it because this is I'm saying as if it's simple, and it is simple, but at the same time, this distinction, really grasping this, is at the heart of what inquiry is all about. Okay, anybody else? Oh, please.
I like the soup analogy. So that was kind of difficult for me. Most of the times I've done formal meditation, it's eyes closed. Like obviously I go throughout my day, I work, walk my dog, those kind of things. My eyes are open, and I try to engage in the practice when I can. But when I first started with eyes open today, it kind of felt like you're trying to go on a fast, and like it's very easy to fast in your room where you control the all the inputs and what food is available. But
Uh-huh,
then you go to like a buffet and try to fast, and all of a sudden you realize like how loud everything becomes.
uh-huh,
And it kind of felt like that. And so for a while, it took me a while to kind of isolate. So I started with an object meditation first. So I looked at a chair in front of me and I said, okay, there's a chair. I'm obviously not the chair. That's easy, right? I know I'm not a chair. I'm pretty sure I'm not a chair. So I look at the chair and then I go, okay, well, there's the word chair appearing in my brain.
uh-huh,
I'm not the word chair that appears in my brain. Okay, well, there's the thought about a chair that like precedes the word chair, and I'm not the thought about the chair either.
uh-huh,
And then there's the thing that's aware of the thought about the chair, right? And there's like this infinite regression occurs,
uh-huh,
and I guess I'm not the thing that's aware that I'm aware of the thought of the chair, right? And like I
uh-huh,
at that point I really wanted to close my eyes, right? It felt like I wanted to close my eyes to go further in. And then I guess I would start over and say I'm aware of the fact that I want to close my eyes, and then I would go back to the chair and keep trying to like run that backwards. But it felt like I hit this wall when I got to like I'm aware of the awareness of the thought of the chair, where it felt hard to go deeper, if that makes sense.
uh-huh.
With my eyes open.
No, 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 that's great. That makes total sense. So here's the thing. So I mean, first of all, a wall is very, very typical and normal to hit eventually. But also say this, right? So um if you can, right? I mean, you did great, right? You started from where you could, and you moved as well as you could in a chain backwards, which is great. Um, but to note, right? So it's interesting, right? You were going object by object, saying, well, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this, right? But but to notice, right, that you know, your experience of whatever it is how do I put this? You know, it's I hesitate to put it this way because it's not exactly right, but you know, it's 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 a part of your experience, right? You're experiencing it. Like it's almost as if you have a sixth sense, right? So there's like five senses. There's like a sixth sense, right? There's an element. There's an because I feel like what happens is, at least the way you described it, right? And there could be more to it than that, honestly, because I said I think you were moving in the right direction, but you know, you're trying to it sounds like you were just trying to logically reason it out, right? Which is has a place in this for sure. But what I want, if you can, to notice is that your sense of I-ness, or your sense of awareness or beingness or here-ness or existence, right? Call it what you will, is something of which you're directly aware in a sense, you know? Like, so yeah, yeah, that's why Ramana says I, right? Like, even just saying that, if you can do nothing else, if you can just mechanically say if that's the most you can do, that's still something, because that it's like, it's pointing to your experience. So in a way, what I'm trying to get at is, don't just think of it as reasoning away from, objects in this logical chain. Rather, recognize that you have a direct experience of yourself as the observer. So try to hone in on your direct experience. Like, I'm here, that sense you have, that, because again, when you're aware of the chair, rather than jumping to the idea that, oh, I can't be the thing that's aware of the chair. I mean, actually, again, your logical sequence was perfect, but just to notice, right, in the awareness of the chair, like, there's a felt component. This is where I said the word feeling is tricky, and I'm not 100% sure I love that word, but for lack of a better word, a felt component. Feeling. You have a feeling that I'm here apart from the chair. Like, it's not just the chair that's here in this. There's two sides of this. One side is a chair, the other side is me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's kind of why I like the soup analogy, because I mean, it also occurred to me that, like, obviously I perceive more distance between myself and the chair than I do myself and the thought of the chair,
Yeah.
right? But the farther back you get, it does become clear that all of it is just phenomena arising in a field,
Yeah.
right? And even though I perceive more distance between me and the chair, I also perceive some distance between me and the idea of a chair.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there is a thing that is perceiving all of that thing in a field outside
Yeah.
of itself, like the ingredients of a soup mixed together,
That's
right?
right. That's
And I
right.
guess that, I mean, that's where grace is, where you can finally sink to the field, right? I guess I don't know, but there
Yeah.
is the awareness. So you just take it back, be aware that you're looking at the soup, and all of it is just ingredients,
Yeah.
and then try
Yes.
to, if you lose that, work it back, try to rest there, work it back, try to rest there, and you just
Yes.
repeat that
Yes. Yes.
until
Well, yeah.
you can
Well,
abide there longer and longer.
resting there, I would say, rather than rest there, continuously question, because again, right? So it's not a harsh distinction between these two things, right? But again, notice, right? And I don't know which, you tell me which one you're talking about, but like, again, there's a distinction between, in a sense, saying, okay, noticing logically, oh yeah, well, there's all these different things. Well, there must be a field that's aware of them, right? There must be that, obviously, right? Which is true. It's logically true. Versus noticing that the observer, you you um are actually newness is something which is being noticed directly, like,
Right.
even from the very beginning. Do you see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Do you like so there's a sense of yourself which is immediate. It's you're knowing it, right?
That
And
would be present at every stage of that
at
regression.
every stage, and it's something which you know. So you don't have to, I mean, it's not wrong to, you don't have to go in a logical chain to be like, oh yeah, well, logically there must be something in which all of these things are encompassed. I mean, that's true. That's very true. But at the same time, what I'm trying to point you to is that there is a direct experience of me as the observer.
So it would be, I mean, it's, again, like, language is tricky, but like it's the same distance step back between I'm not the chair to the direct experience as it is to
Yes.
I'm not the idea of the chair to the direct
Yes. Yes.
experience.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And not trying to visualize it as like this walk backwards, because then you're creating more distance between the direct experience and the thing you are experiencing,
And
and go straight from chair to experience rather than like I have to get back to the idea to get to the observer.
that's definitely true. So it's all, like, you can view it all as all being on one flat piece of paper, right? So the
Right.
chair and the thought of the chair and the thought of the thought of the thought of the chair are all on a piece of paper, and they're all they have the same relationship to the paper, basically. But again, what I want to get at is what I want to get at is, I'm going to say it one more time. But I mean, it can take time to sink in. So it's I'll just say this, I'll say it over time, as many times as it requires. But the sense of you being there, I want you to try to feel into it. Like I, in some sense, is a feeling, right? Again, I don't like that word that much, but I'm going to say it regardless, because it emphasizes the directness of it, right? Like, in the moment, right now, as you hear my voice, right? You hear my voice. The voice is a piece of information. As you hear my voice, subtly attending that as a separate piece of information, the piece of information which we usually just don't even think about, you know you are not the sound of my voice. You know directly without having to think, without having to logically elaborate, like, oh yeah, well, I'm hearing the voice, therefore I must not be the voice, therefore I must be something other than the voice, and so on, right? That's like a logical chain, right? Without that, you hear the voice. By hearing the voice, you also, I mean, at the same time, not even by hearing, at the same time, you simultaneously know immediately, I'm not the voice. I'm hearing the voice. I'm not the voice, right? That sense of I am other than thisness, than this particularity. I'm here. I'm present to this particularity, right? That it's something which is felt somehow, you know? So that sense, like, oh yeah, it's not just the voice. I'm the silent here apart from that, that's observing it, but not it. Like that immediacy, the immediacy of that knowledge. You just know it. You somehow know it. That knowledge is what we're like, well, what is that knowledge? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. So it would almost be easier to go from looking at the object, the chair, than my thought, the chair, because that object, that knowledge is more immediate with the chair than it is my thought of the
No, no,
chair.
no. It's not more immediate. It's equally immediate in every case.
Right. But I mean, like, I guess, like, in my, yeah, I don't know how to phrase that.
Oh, okay.
Like, it's more clear immediately to me, like this human, that I'm not the chair than it is I'm
Okay.
not the thought of the chair.
Yes. Sure.
So, like,
Sure.
so
Sure.
that direct experience of just being without being the chair would be like a shorter walk. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm saying that.
Yeah, yeah, no, no. I mean, so I'll tell you. I mean, I do see what you're saying, but regardless, you'll see, right, as you're already seeing, right, when in the process of getting to this, in the process of searching for this immediate feeling that seems more immediate with the chair than with the thought of the chair, um, you will have to walk through these more subtle steps where it's harder and harder to differentiate.
You have to discard them all. I mean,
Well, yeah, you'll have to discard them.
everything must go.
You're gonna have to notice as your mind gets subtler and subtler, right? So as Geeta was saying earlier, right? So she had that experience also going from grosser to subtler, from more obvious to less obvious, right? Eventually, we will enter these states where like peace or silence, where it's very hard to differentiate, right? It feels almost as if we're just completely that, right? There's a barely the thinnest film of difference, but it's there. Actually, the difference is still there. Even so, you'll have to get there anyway. Point. You'll have to come to that point of subtlety or discernment, regardless. Actually, but just to start to notice that what we're looking for is something, which we feel
the felt experience of
felt experience.
not the logical deduction into it.
Exactly. Logical deduction is auxiliary, it's supportive, but it's, the basic point is right now, again, it's just like looking through a window, right? You look through a window and you're absorbed. I mean, it's a really interesting scene, right? It's Switzerland or something like that, and like beautiful mountains and snow falling, and you're like, wow, it's gorgeous, right? And then, someone knocks at the door and you come to. You're like, oh yeah, I'm here. Right? You had forgotten you were there staring through the window because the scene was so entrancing.
Yeah.
Right? And then a knock at the door and like you're back to yourself, quote unquote, right? You had forgotten you were standing at the window. So we want to notice, right? You have that separate piece of information, which had never disappeared. You were looking at the scene. Always at some level, you knew you were there looking at the scene. At some level, it just wasn't noticed. Right? When the knock on the door comes, you notice. So in the same way, it's as if we are looking through a window all the time, and we are generally speaking, not paying attention to the fact that we are standing at the window. And so we want to essentially knock at our own door continuously to continuously remind ourselves, like in continuity,
Right.
that we're here, aware of the scene. We're not the scene. We're not the scene. We're not the scene. There's immediate awareness of that fact. We don't need to go through logical deduction. There's immediate awareness of I'm here, not this.
Okay.
So yeah, this will take time. But it's worth clarifying as many times as it requires because again, this is the heart of it. So I'm curious,
So,
by the way, did anyone try surrender?
so like,
Raj, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I tried surrender today and also during the week at most instances, and sometimes I seem to find surrender is more easy, and sometimes I seem to find, you know, when I get tired of surrender, I seem to think self-inquiry is better. So I had a question regarding self-inquiry, actually, Akilesh. So in cases where the barrage of thoughts is very powerful, especially if there is a work situation or a situation of crisis, etc., there's a powerful barrage of thoughts that come in, or when there's a lot of activities to be taken care of. So when you do self-inquiry in such cases, so the way I understand it is you say, who is this thought occurring to? So who am I or where am I?
Yes, sure.
Now, is it good to then pause as if to wait for an answer and enjoy a little bit of that silence or a void, or before the next thought comes, or do you keep sort of servicing each thought as it comes very quickly? I was a bit struggling with that. So any little bit color on that would be good.
Yeah,
Because
sure.
I thought it was becoming mechanical when I'm trying to practice it to pace every thought. So yeah.
No, it's a good question, and I'm glad you brought it up because it's going to go right to what I just was talking about, right? See, the purport of these questions, right? To understand why are we asking these questions? We're not asking the questions to ask the questions. We're asking the questions as reminders to look for yourself standing at that window, right? So that the sense that we have in each moment of being and being apart from whatever thoughts that are going on, we're searching for that. So, you know, when a thought comes, the point of asking these questions is, like, oh, who's aware of the thought? We're asking this question to get ourselves to repoint our attention towards, right? So the issue is not the issue is not you know, can I fire the question away every single thought that comes? Issue is, where's my attention? Is my attention pointed towards, is it seeking? Is it seeking the one who observes? Does that make sense? That's all the point of the purport of the questions is just turn the attention inward, you know. So when you learn to do that, in fact, you know, eventually you can dispense with the questions. You can just do it silently. You don't need the questions anymore, because the point is you'll now have understood what it is we're looking for, which is, you know, again, we've used these analogies before, but again, or like, you know, with the, you know, the person standing by the window, or the person, you know, again, looking at a mirror, right, and trying to notice, for example, in metaphor, right, to notice the surface of the mirror, right, the silvery surface of the mirror. When you notice a silvery surface of the mirror, what happens to the objects? They blur, like my background, basically. So when you say, for example, oh, well, many things are happening in the mirror simultaneously, right? A shower of objects are coming, right? It doesn't really matter whether for each specific object you're saying, well, you know, what are they being reflected on? What are they being reflected on? What are they being reflected on? No, I mean, the point is to notice, and to keep trying to, you know, keep your attention refocusing on the mirror quality of the mirror.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the point. So when you ask these questions, to recognize this, or hunting, self-inquiry, it's a hunt, right? Like, where am I? Like, in this picture, where am I? You know, or where is the mirror? Or, you know, where am I standing by the window? Right? These are basically, you know, all, and not to think of it purely logically, but to think of it as experientially. Like, experientially, I know I must be here, right? I mean, and to foreground that sense, which, by the way, as soon as you foreground it, what do we notice? We notice, of course, it can't be it, because whatever it is that we foreground is an object, right? So we pick this feeling, quote unquote, we're looking for I. we pick this feeling, whatever feeling we pick can't be I, because by definition, something we're aware of. So that's not I. So then again, we're like, okay, well, that can't be it, and we don't necessarily have to. We can play it out logically, verbally, but the point is it's as if, again, as you're looking at the mirror, you think you have the mirror, but then but then actually, as soon as you think you notice the mirror, that turns out to be a reflection in another mirror.
Right.
As soon as you notice the mirror, that turns out to be a reflection, and you have to re-notice the mirror and re-notice the mirror. But the point is, at every point in time, no matter what is being reflected, there's always a surface of reflection.
Right.
No matter. So that's the point. Like, that's the purpose. That's the purpose of the questions. That's the point, is to get you to hunt down your experience of you in that situation.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
to understand clearly, that's why we're asking the questions, and for no other reason. So we don't want to be mechanical about asking them, and nor is it particularly a matter of, I mean, you can waiting for an answer, because the waiting for an answer piece, I mean, it's also beside the point, because you're looking, the answer will come by grace when it comes, but the point is, the part that you can do is to recognize as best you can what it is we're looking for, which is you as the observer, the sense you have of being the observer in that moment. I guess.
Akilesh, can I add something?
Hold on one second.
So that, sorry,
Christian wanted to ask a question, and then I'll come to you in a second, Vidya. Yeah.
No, last week you said that don't hold on to the theory and you have to go into the practice, right? In the last week call.
Yeah.
Usually I start from theory. The theory is that, your awareness, self is awareness, right? And you are the reflection of the awareness. So when you wake up, the body sense comes into picture, and then you are forgetting the awareness, right? So then you're focused body, you're aware of the body, but you're forgetting the real awareness. So with that, so I asked you about, even when you were here, the idea was to take the body consciousness away into the awareness, or somewhat like sleeping without sleeping, going into that type of mode of living. So when you approach that way, when you do this practice of inquiry, go into a state where you are practicing, and what you don't, you get a peace, right? So when you go into the inquiry mode, you have the peace of, everything is quiet, right?
Yes.
And you okay. So when you start inquiring and break, who is getting the peace, it disturbs you. You get an uneasy feeling comes into the picture. You don't want to go into the uneasiness, so you go back into the peace. So you are quiet. So is it? So you go back and forth between the uneasiness and the peace.
Yes.
Is that the correct way to do it? Gita goes into so much of all these. I feel that I'm missing out on a lot of these things. I don't get too much thought. When I go into this inquiry mode, thoughts don't come too much to me. I am very quiet. I can be peaceful for a long time. But then I'm worried that, what am I doing here? Because when I poke it, then I get uneasy feeling or a little fear, whatever it is.
Yes. Well, you should poke. That's the only thing. You don't need to poke with extraneous thoughts. You don't need to poke with random thoughts, right? But rather just to notice that even in the piece, you're there as the observer. So there's a question being asked, which is, who am I, right? Where is the observer, right? And if you want to think of it as inquiry, right? Or if you want to think of it as surrender, then you need to recognize that this piece too is an experience, and it is an attachment, so to say, and we need to ignore it, basically.
Right.
So when you get the uneasiness or fear, as you said for a second, right? I think that's actually quite relevant, because at some level, right, our attachment, some deep level attachment is to our identity as separate individuals, right? So when you're in that piece, it is a subtle state, right? And trying to go beyond that piece by asking who is experiencing the piece, or by surrendering the piece, is a threat to your identity at a deep level, basically. So fear can result, uneasiness can result. And then you have to then, so that attachment to individual identity is coming up in that moment. And then you have to say, okay, well, who's aware of this fear that's coming up? Who's aware of this uneasiness? Because the peace that you get, which is temporary, obviously, is an experience and it's insufficient. So we need something which is going to be not subject to coming and going. So yeah, poke with inquiry, poke, I would suggest. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But see, I'm going back and forth between the peace and the uneasiness, peak and the. So I don't know. The peace is more peaceful, so you don't want to poke it. You're sitting.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. No, but you should because yeah, of course, you don't want to disturb the peace because the peace is peaceful.
Happy.
But
Peace.
right, but we have to recognize, while that piece is superior to many other thoughts, that piece is itself a subtle thought. And so we
Correct.
can't rest easy there. We have to keep pushing, push.
Got it.
Yeah, because otherwise it'll be super irritating when you fall out of the piece, and that's the moment we recognize, oh yeah, well, this is not enough, basically.
So you have to go into that observer experience again at that piece.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to seek the observer, right? So remember, go into the observer experience. Like that language is problematic because whatever experience you go into is being observed. So I always like to think of it as you are you're seeking the horizon, right? You can never get to the horizon. You should think of it like that, right? Like you cannot whatever if you're shooting an arrow towards the horizon, it's always going to fall somewhere short of the horizon. Wherever you are between whatever you're looking at cannot be the horizon. The horizon is always beyond that. So anything which you observe cannot be the observer experience. The observer experience is by definition, cannot be observed in the normal way. So what you're doing is to recognize I am somehow, but this is the paradox, right? The paradox is I am somehow aware that I'm the observer, but every time I look for how it is I know that, I end up with something which is observed, not the observer. So it's a riddle, right? Oh, all I see are the things I see, and I don't see myself, right? Where am I? Where am I in the situation? And so you're hunting that because you do somehow know that you are. You know that you're not the pieces. You have the sense of your own existence, but when you search for that sense, you just see piece after piece after piece. And so, but where are you? You must be there somewhere. You know that you're there somewhere. And so when you hunt for that, when you go through the series of pieces and you keep pushing, right? Looking for you, then eventually by grace, right? There's a perspective shift because you can't actually get to you in the usual perspective. But by pushing in the usual perspective continuously, it sets the ground for the weakening of the attachments. And eventually, grace comes and frees you from that perspective which would trap you in a certain way.
Right.
Yes.
Takes a long time, it looks like. I'm doing it for so long, it doesn't go anywhere.
No, but you've been weakening your attachments all this while, so it's certainly not been useless. You have been doing the work, and eventually it will pay off 100%. So it's you just have to lay the groundwork, and it's like bamboo growing underground, right? It grows underground for a long time, and suddenly it springs into, above the surface.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
Oh, Vidya, I think you had a question.
Yeah. Yes, I just wanted to add to what Raj was mentioning. Sorry, my apologies. We are driving from Southern California, and I'm not driving. My husband is driving.
No
so,
problem.
yeah, and it was good to practice in a real life situation like this. So I just wanted to add to what Raj was saying, right? And this goes back to when the internal noise level is high, right? It's using the soup analogy. You can't just taste the water at all, right? I mean, intellectually that you have to find that, and then it becomes really hard. Either surrender or self-inquiry becomes very hard. So when I experienced that, what, two things, one is I resorted to, went into my yoga toolkit and I did a yoga nidra practice.
Yeah.
And after that, I was able to settle the dust a little bit, right? So that was one. Then two, when we were hiking, right? I mean, just during the hiking, that walking, it just gives a little distance. And so then the practice becomes easier. At least that was some of the practical tools that I was, trying to, work through in my own situation. So that was one observation. Then two is now while I was practicing in the car, somehow the inquiry and surrender kind of, I was able to see that they were the flip side of each, when I was just letting things, not, then I was automatically going, to inquiry, right? I mean, where am I kind of a thing. So that was the second. Then third, while I was going through all these practical things, and I'm also reading one book on the teachings of Maharishi. And so one thing that struck me yesterday, there were all these questions on self-inquiry. So who's doubting? Where are all the questions? And apparently when you get into the practice, you get more thoughts, that increases the noise level. So then the thing that registered with me was go to the doubter, who's doubting, who's getting all these questions, right? Instead of, if you go thought by thought or question by question, there's no end to it, right? So just go to who's having all these questions, which is along the lines of what you were just saying, that felt sense of,
Yes.
who's, yeah. So these were my
Yeah,
comments.
great. Yeah, exactly. So first of all, talking about, the yoga toolkit you're talking about, I think that's great. Exactly. So when you are confronted with a mind which is full of thoughts, either situationally because something stressful is happening, or more chronically, you always have two options, right? So one option is just turn to the practice purely, because the practice is a very powerful tool. But if you do feel overwhelmed and unable to practice, right, then well, one thing is you can always quote unquote step down to, let's say, karma yoga, or even more mechanical means, right? So again, like I'll mention earlier, Maharishi saying to somebody who couldn't do self-inquiry, right, just literally say I. That's like a mantra almost, but it does help quiet the mind and move it in the right direction, right? So whatever you can do, right, I view it as a kind of ladder, right? Step down to the point where you can do something and do that, right? The other element of it, which you're pointing to, is there's two ways of doing it, right? So with, again, our mirror analogy, right? If the mirror is full of random things that are happening, and lots of motion, it's harder to try to see the mirror's mirrorness in that moment. So the other thing we can do is obviously try to reorganize the things that are happening in the mirror and make them more integrated in some sense, right? And that's the reason for all the recommendations for various disciplines like morality and my recommendations for therapy. All of that have to do with reorganizing the thoughts that are themselves happening, right? Because there's two pieces here. One is make the thoughts themselves more singular, calmer, more one piece, so it's easier to deal with them. And the other is to notice that whatever's happening, they're just thoughts, right? Because I mean, it's just like a TV that way, right? You could have a war movie on, or you could have, The Sound of Music or whatever, either way, it's on a TV, so there's that element, right? So you can use either way. So you're pointing to that, I think. And then you mentioned this idea, well, you somehow were driving and you can see now how surrender and inquiry are the flip side of each other, which I think is fantastic. That's great. So that's already a fruit of your practice. Because they are, in fact, right? As you defocus from objects, your attention is moving towards the observer, or I, and vice versa. And then the third thing you said is talking about, focusing on the doubter, which is exactly right. So the point of all of these exercises is, as these thoughts come, right, they're overwhelming because we are not recognizing that we are not them. We're not seeing the doubter who's having these doubts. So as soon as you focus on that, or try to focus on that, the thoughts immediately lose some of their power. So yeah, great observations.
I mean, when those thoughts come, sometimes they look so real, right? Yeah, and it was interesting to.
Oh, I think you cut off.
And this again, Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah. We are going through a low signal patch. So I will let, so I'll stop talking at this point.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Jay, I think you had a question, and then we'll come back to you keep up after that.
Thank you. So a couple of things. One is, so today for the first time I tried surrender based on your description. I sort of let things, and the way I did it was let things glaze over. I had my eyes open. That's also a new experience for me because typically my meditation means eyes closed. So I just let things glaze over, I guess, visually as well as inside. But I find myself slipping into inquiry, maybe because that's what I know. It was like it was sliding into inquiry. It's not like I'm doing surrender now and then there's a distinction. It was sort of the surrender just sort of gradually became inquiry on its own. I don't know if that's normal or I'm doing something wrong.
No, it's totally fine. Well, first of all, right, just to reiterate, either path is fully complete. You don't actually have to do both if you don't want to, and there's nothing wrong with doing both. And the reason there's nothing wrong with doing both is because, as Vidya pointed out earlier, they're ultimately the same. So they have different flavors, that's all. But basically, they're flip sides of a coin. So it's very natural, I think. Once you go down surrender to a certain element, it could be very natural to say, yeah, but who exactly is surrendering? Makes total sense. And vice versa, if you're in inquiry at a certain point and you come to a so-called wall, then you can surrender the wall, so to say, you can ignore it. And keep and repetitively keep ignoring, right? I should mention this, right? That when you are letting your not just your physical eyes, but your mental eye glaze over, right? Nevertheless, there's something behind it, which is paying attention to make sure that your mental eye stays glazed over. So it is kind of the unblinking awareness to make sure that you're not paying attention to anything. So you're paying attention to that. You're paying attention to that piece. That you don't focus on anything, but rather relax, completely relax, continuously relax, right? You're attentive to the relaxation. But yes, no, I mean, it is perfectly natural to go into inquiry if you'd like, and nothing wrong with that. So you can mix and match as you like.
Is surrender the same or similar to what other practices called acceptance? Is that?
Well, there is
no.
some similarity. I don't love the acceptance idea. I'll tell you why. Because acceptance to me suggests an emotional state. So, it's like I have to emotionally accept something, or it's something I don't like. I have to feel like I accept it. Versus what I'm saying with surrender is a little bit different because you might feel, no, I dislike this and I don't accept it, right? That's a feeling too. And in surrender, what you would say is, well, whether I have a feeling of acceptance or non-acceptance, they're both feelings, i.e., they're both thoughts. And either one, I ignore them. I ignore it. So you don't, with surrender, the beauty is you're not trying to force yourself to have an emotional reaction of some kind. You're recognizing that whatever reaction you have, including a reaction of hostility or anger, right, fury or whatever, anxiety, whatever that is fine. If you can view it that as acceptance, right? I can accept my non-acceptance. That's fine, right? You're basically just saying whatever it is, it's all just white noise. It's all just irrelevant, right? Like it all blurs and it doesn't matter what it is, right? And I'm not going to pay attention to any of it. I'm not going to take any of it seriously. I'm not going to invest my willpower in any of it. I'm not going to focus on any of it, right? So if you view that as acceptance, then that's fine. But I don't want to say acceptance as a certain emotion that you have to have.
So acceptance as in let it be, just let it be.
Acceptance as in, well, yes, let whatever you're feeling be. Let whatever you're thinking be, right? You're not
Don't
trying
try to act on it, kind of thing, and just let it be. Is that the same as?
Yeah, you can view it that way, right? Don't view it as anything to do with you. So your entire that includes your entire spectrum of thinking and feeling. So your entire spectrum of thinking and feeling, even the thoughts you have about planning, about having to do this or that, right? Or the anxieties you have, right? In other words, you're not trying to stop. Be very clear. You're not trying to stop your negative emotions. You're not trying to stop anything that you're feeling or thinking. Rather, you're trying to notice that whatever you're feeling and thinking is happening in the field of experience, and it's all equally irrelevant. You're going to view that as external to you. That's all happening on the TV. It's all happening on the TV. Your entire mental world is outside you. So if you can say whatever that is, whatever that, whatever Jay's mind is thinking, whatever his heart is feeling, and whatever is happening in the external world, all of those together as a whole are one big blob. We're just going to ignore it all. That's what surrender is. And I'm going to stay in that position of relaxed, ignoring, and I'm going to attentively make sure that I don't unrelax. And if I do unrelax, then I'm going to notice it and I'm going to re-relax.
One more question on what you said a few minutes ago was completely new to me in terms of the inquiry part. So I mean, I'm doing the inquiry as you mentioned purely logically. So the way I'm thinking is you use the pole analogy. There's the observer at one end of the pole and what's observed at the other end. And I'm thinking you sort of slowly sliding up the pole, sort of discarding things that you are not. But I'm assuming there's no such thing as turning towards the other end of the pole. You can only reduce the boundary, sort of slide up the boundary of the pole, the boundary of who you are versus who you think you are versus who you are not. That's the way I'm thinking about it. But again, this is too logical. But you mentioned something about it's not just about logically concluding that you are not that, but you have to have an intuitive inner sense of who's there at that time.
You
that
do
kind
have it, right? You haven't. See, the thing is, I've used this. Unfortunately, I have to borrow my old analogies all the time because I can't think of new ones so quickly. But it's like on this side of the pole, you might view it as, there's a light shining, okay? And then there's a series of like transparencies or, little plastic slides or something like that are all in a stack, okay, in front of you. And the light is shining through this stack, right? The light, it's not something which you just have to logically come to, like, oh yeah, there must be a light shining. No, you know that light directly. It's just the light is conditioned by all the transparencies that it's flowing through, right? In the moment, you know that you're here, and it's just that if that light is that sense of you're here is it is filtered through a whole bunch of thoughts, memories, and identifications of what you think you are, basically. So, but it's not like those things can prevent the light from coming through. The light is there. So, you have to recognize that you are experiencing the light in some form right now. It's not a logical conclusion to come to. You don't have to think, I mean, it is logical, but it's also direct, in the same way that okay, again, right, right now, you're tasting something. It may not be very much. It may be something extremely, neutral, right? You're not eating anything particular, but your taste buds are technically active at some level. You can transfer your attention to your taste buds, right? At all times, your taste is in some sense active, but it's just very, very muted beneath all the other things that are happening. So, logically, you would say, oh yeah, well, I have a tongue, I must be tasting something, and that must be there, right? That's one thing. But you can also just transfer your attention to your tongue. What is my tongue tasting right now? Do you see what I'm saying? Like there's something which you're directly experiencing, which is the logic talks about that, but the logic is not that itself. It's merely giving you a set of concepts with which to navigate that to some extent. But you have it just as directly as you're seeing or you're hearing, in fact, more directly than any of those things, or you're thinking or you're feeling. Any of your actual sensations or thoughts or feelings, all of those are known like you would say in some sense directly, right? You don't have to think, you don't have to think to yourself, well, I'm in a room right now and I have eyes, my eyes are functional and my brain is functional, which means that I must be seeing something. Like you don't have to run through that logical chain to know that you're seeing something, right? Like you just see, right? You see what I'm saying?
Yes, yes.
Right? Like we could use logic to dissect what might be happening in that process of vision, but the vision itself is something which you are experiencing directly, so to say. In the same way, in fact, even more so, you're experiencing directly the fact that you're experiencing it all. The experiencer is experienced in some sense even more directly than any of your senses, because all your senses require it. They're built on it. So, that's what we want to start as a fundamental, right? So moving, yes, moving towards the pole. I mean, that is correct, right? And we are moving towards the light. That's all. It's all very correct. But but to notice that, it's not just negating things that we show, but that we're actually moving toward the light, which we are sensing through these things. Like you're here, which is again the very fundamental observation. You're here right now, and you're not any of the things that you're seeing, touching, tasting, hearing, or whatever, feeling. Okay, and you're not anything in your emotions, and you're not your thinking. You know that you're here, like that sense of you're existing. You want to hone in on that. You don't have to go through the end of a logical chain to reach that point. Like at every point, you exist.
Yeah, so that's actually, this is one thing I wanted to ask. This is even prior to the one thing, again, I'm too logical and that may be getting in the way.
I'm too logical
But the
and
one thing,
getting in the way. But the one thing,
sorry, there's some kind of a echo.
Is it?
So one thing, how do you know you exist is the one thing you know for sure, absolutely undeniable, is that there is existence. I mean, it's not nothing, right? It's not this something. But the only way, at least I can come to the conclusion, is because of something arising. I mean, like a sensation or something. It is not nothing. There is existence. So in the absence of anything, I don't know what what the conclusion would be. So again, this is all logical, but I think you're pointing at some direct intuitive.
I'm not talking about something which is. I'm not. So look, the questions about what would exist in the absence of sensation, etc. And I could give philosophical answers and arguments about it, but really it's beside the point. The issue is right now you do seem to have sensation. And I'm not talking about any deep intuition. We start with something which is very obvious. Right now, in this moment of sensation, for example, again, you're hearing my voice. Do you not know that you're not my voice? You don't have to run through a logical calculation to know that you're observing my voice, that you as the observer are not my voice. You are here in some sense, whatever here means. You're here in some sense, observing the voice, and therefore not the voice. Don't you know that directly? Like, I mean, in your experience. That's all I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the larger significance of this or what it would be in some other circumstance or conditions, just right now.
Yes.
Right. So that's what I'm talking about. So that sense, that very extremely moment-to-moment sense, oh yeah, I'm here, and I'm not the stuff that I'm observing. That. We're hunting what that is. And as you hunt what that is, it's not just what you're not. You're like, oh yeah, I know, I'm here. It's not just the voice that I'm hearing. It's also this extra piece of information. It's like the space around a shape. It's like you see a shape, and you don't notice the fact that there's stuff around the shape. If you couldn't have space around the shape, you couldn't have the shape. Right? Like it's immediately known. If I see something with a boundary, there has to be something around the boundary. Otherwise, the boundary could not be perceived. So you're not used to looking at the space around the boundary, but there it is. Every time there's a boundary, there's space around it. That's what it means to have a boundary, in fact. So, so that element, which is like the negative part of it, of something, right? The space that surrounds something, which you know just as well as you know the thing. We're like, well, what is that part? That you experience directly, immediately. Does that make any sense?
Yes, it's easier with external things, but as you get closer and closer, it's hard to.
Yes, that's get harder and harder. That's correct.
Yeah.
So that's good. That's right. That's exactly right. And so, it will require more and more effort. And basically to recognize as you do this more and more continuously, again and again, right? The thing that makes it harder essentially ultimately are various attachments, because various attachments are pulling on your mind and they're, depleting your mind's ability to concentrate, and its desire to concentrate, to see, So as you do this, at whatever level you're able and whatever fashion you're able, slowly those attachments will like, those cords will snap to various extents. And ultimately you're right. At the very deep level, the deep intuition cannot be obtained directly through your efforts. There has to be an element of grace that will enter at a certain point. But that's that's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to go as far as you can.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah, Geeta.
Before me, Raj had raised the
Oh,
right.
no. Oh, okay.
So yeah,
It's okay, Geeta, go ahead.
But yeah, if you, because you raised your hand before me, so you can go, then I will go.
Oh, no, I think I was just meaning to share another thing with Akilesh, that last night when I got up in the middle of the night, I was dealing with thoughts, and so as I was lying down in the bed, I was trying my best to practice surrender. But it was a continuous struggle, because much as I would try to practice surrender, I found myself being hijacked by those thoughts. And those were thoughts of spirituality. Those were thoughts of books I read, the thoughts of this, but it didn't matter. I was continuously, so it felt like a constant struggle that I kept coming back. And then, of course, that whole energy in the process made me not go back to sleep. So it did seem like, I was not succeeding at all. That I was being constantly hijacked.
Well, it's good. It's, honestly, I'll say, look, it's actually a sign of progress that you're noticing so much conflict. Because again, it's like, I may have said this before, but it's I think often sometimes, well, some people at the very, very beginning, it can seem like, oh, it's super easy. But then as soon as the plane starts flying a little lower to the ground and starts seeing more of the terrain, then they start recognizing, oh my God, my mind is so full of all this garbage. I mean, in this case, it's not garbage, spiritual thoughts, but still, you see spiritual thoughts are problematic too. It is a fight. In many, many ways, it is a fight. You see it in the Gita, Arjuna says to Krishna, like, it seems like the mind is impossible, right? It's like trying to conquer the wind, And Krishna says, well, yeah, it's pretty difficult, but it's doable. You just keep exerting your effort again and again, just persevere. He's like, just persevere. That's what literally what Krishna says. So, it is a battle. And Maharishi says, it's like, he likens it to, a fortress where you have to one by one fight all the protectors of the fortress, one by one, they're going to come out. You have to defeat them. So, yeah, it's very normal for it to be a battle, is the truth. And again, if you can spot, various things, I mean, there are other ways, again, of dealing with things, right? Because, for example, right, let's suppose that, you had a bunch of health issues, right? And maybe the health issues were because your lifestyle wasn't so great, it might be the case that, in that case, you would directly address those health issues and be like, okay, I need to like eat better, that might make your mind quieter, for example, you have certain other dials that you can change that will make the practice easier in that sense. But yes, yeah, it's normal. It's basically normal for it to be a battle for a long time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
I will.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. I see. I was contemplating on the like all the big experiences and everything in the past, everything flowing through like a mirror, and I am able to see that they're all going through, and I saw the mirror and things like that, and so I could experience that. Then afterwards, then I figured out that the mirror is not an opaque mirror; it's a complete transparent kind of a mirror where I experience I that mirror is nothing but me kind of a feeling.
Uh-huh.
So it's not like it's not that some external mirror is reflecting only me. I am reflecting that, kind of a feeling, and then I feel that I don't have anything. Then I want to be a very very clear kind of a plea. Then I can reflect. It is me that is reflecting, kind of a feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, that's a glimpsey sort of thought, I would say, right? What you're talking about. Yes. And I would just encourage you, just keep feeding that too into the inquiry, right? Don't take anything which comes and goes, right? I mean, that
Yeah.
is a beautiful insight, and you're right, actually. That's well put. And
And I
it is
also
close,
look
it is close to the truth.
Spadika lingam, right? It reflects
Yes.
complete light is completely it doesn't hold anything. Everything is there. It gets reflected. Just
Yes.
that feeling. It's a yeah, and also that's why I was just trying to see. Oh, I am getting this feeling, and that goes off, and I also aware of that feeling. It goes off, and then I remember the past, that goes off. Then it's all getting reflected on me, and then he said, I myself reflect everything, and also that kind of a feeling. So
Yeah.
that
So that's again, right? So, I just want to say two things. Right? Again, I want to say that's exactly in the right direction. And then I also want to say this too is an experience,
yeah, correct.
right? So again, just keep noticing, right? Yes, this is an insightful experience that I am in fact reflecting everything. It is. At the same time, who's having this insight?
Yes.
To notice that this insight is arising as a thought to me. Where am I? I'm reflecting everything. That's another thought. Who's having that thought?
Yes.
So just keep pushing, because again, any insight that comes can go. So, just to recognize that however correct the insight, and this is a correct insight, it's still just a thought. And in a way, it's still a distraction from what you actually are wanting, which is beyond and timeless.
Mhm.
So yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Then the
Yes.
other thing
Go ahead.
really pondered on the fact that the calamity is also in itself is a beauty, and exploring that further, and I like it's kind of a surrender as well as appreciating the calamity and what the calamity has done to me, and then that has got a beautiful side of it. And so that kind of that kind of opening, or that kind of insight is very powerful this week.
That's
I
good.
feel.
That's good. Well, yes, exactly. And calamities can be beautiful in many different ways, right? I mean, first of all, they can have an artistic beauty to them because
Yeah,
they have so much
if
art.
yeah, when my father died, everybody talked about him, and then the whole beauty of his life came out,
Yeah.
which we didn't know about many things about others, how they observed him, and so the beauty in that death also kind of a feeling.
Yes. Exactly. You're exactly right. And then Maharishi would say, anyway, why is there suffering? Because it's there to turn us towards God. That's another beauty of it. And then most fundamentally, also, right? as you surrender or as you inquire, right? To the extent that we are able to, you know, recognize that these things are all happening, so to say, like you said, on this transparent mirror, then we're able to enjoy it as the play of light, you know, like the calamities are also just another play of light. They're just, you know, just like a painter needs, you know, black and red and not just, you know, white and yellow, right? These are just other colors. So, you know, to the extent that we are able to, you know, recognize that we're not implicated in these events, then we're able to enjoy them as just like birds, you know, in the forest or something like that. They're just phenomena that are beautiful.
Yes,
So,
beautiful outlook. Yeah. And
yeah.
then third, I wanted to today's thing, what you said about the soup. And but one thing is the water or anything or say is underlying everything. But you also mentioned it is not inside; it's outside observing. So
Yeah.
that means analogy is little conflicting.
Yeah.
I felt.
It's correct. You're absolutely right. So there's difficulties with every metaphor. You're 100% right. So, you know, we draw this initial you know, distinction, you know, we want to sharply separate the observed from the observer and have you hunt the observer side, you know. At the end of the process of that process, it will be recognized that the observed observer distinction is fictional in some sense. And really, what seems like the separate observer is actually something which encompasses both observer and observed. So, you know, so the soup analogy. So, you know, the thing is, right? So, what we're doing here is you know, we're just, you know, the point being that that right now it feels like there's a mixture. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to mentally abstract away the specific elements of a soup that are the non-water, like just by ignoring them, right? Cutting them out mentally without cutting them out physically, to focus on what is not any of these specific components, right? You know, ultimately we're going to find, you know, okay, there really, you know, these distinctions are all fictional. There is just the soup or something like that. Maybe you could say that, right? But the point is to first draw a sharp line and and to um and to hunt what that, because the thing is that water, see, yeah, I mean, in a soup, that's a problem with the metaphor, right? In a soup, there really is the water. But in our situation, it may not be the case that the observer exists in the way that we think it exists. The observer may seem to be one thing, but is actually something else. So that is the difference between that and the soup analogy, you know. But the place where it's the same is that in our experience, we experience it as one big conglomerate. And we're trying to isolate. We know that there is water here somewhere. And we're trying to just focus on that piece as opposed to many, many things that are brighter and louder. How can we ignore the bright, loud flavors and textures and just focus on the water and hunt the water? But the difference is that when we do hunt the water in that way, we may find out, oh, actually, it's not water at all. It's something different, something unimaginable. But you see what I'm saying? We want that distinction initially. That distinction may be undermined at the end. But we need that distinction initially because the mystery is this underrated, understated, underappreciated facet of our experience, which is the experiencer part. That part, that piece, first we focus on that. It liberates us to a large extent from thinking that we are in the experienced portion of things. And then it finally burns itself up. And it turns out that what the observer is not what we thought it was at all.
Wonderful.
All right. Any last questions? I'll take one last question, if there are any. And if not, we'll call it to a close. All right. Okay. So we'll meet same time next week. Thank you all. And keep practicing and get your questions ready for next week. All right. Take care. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.